Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Look, you and I have talked plenty about the inconsistencies with this team, so if I put this one on a tee for you, were you surprised by the performance Sunday in Minnesota?
Wasn't surprised that they lost at Minnesota. I was surprised they played what I consider their worst game of the season. I guess Tampa is a candidate, but this is definitely the worst their defense has played. That makes no sense. We thought the defense was something you could count on this team. They played awful in this game. And the offense, which we know it's hard to expect 3 good weeks in a row. Looks like it was week 1 all over again. So that was really frustrating.
Mike, I've been thinking about this week. Is the defense really good? Because they're trending in the wrong direction over the last month.
Right.
And they're really good for a half. But if you're good for a half and bad for a half, that's still a 50-50 proposition. So are they really good?
Well, that's their new thing. They weren't just good for a half. The last 5 years and the first 4 or 5 games of this season. They were legit good. And then when they take the Minnesota game aside, these other games where they were bad for a half, they started playing great for a half. I mean, like Chicago, they played terrible, of course, early in the game. Taysom was running, he was completing passes to everyone. And then they woke up and they took 5 turnovers away from them. So it's like, yeah, they were shaking the grog out of their head and then being like, all right, this is not who we are. Let's be who we are. Minnesota was more disturbing than that because they were bad for 3 quarters, and when they got good, yeah, they started getting the ball back to the offense, but no takeaways. I guess they had 2 sacks in the game, but they weren't making impact plays. So yeah, coming out of this Minnesota game, you question how good the defense really is. But for the most part, I think they're definitely a top 10 defense with the potential to be even more than that. Now, losing Marshawn Lattimore to a high ankle sprain will hurt that because he's their best defensive player.
Do you think he is, or is Paulson Adebo your best defensive player?
Well, I think it is Marshawn Lattimore, but and Paulson Adebo is intercepting passes because they don't throw to Marshawn Lattimore, so he doesn't get as many opportunities at interception. But no, I mean, if you want to say who's the MVP of the team, Paulson Adebo is absolutely on a short list of candidates this year.
Is Mike Triplett's with us? What would you say is the biggest question or concern defensively heading into the bye here in week 11?
It is the defensive line in general. But I am so sick of this plan that they have against running quarterbacks. And that I'm not talking about letting Tyson Bagent escape or Baker Mayfield escape or Trevor Lawrence escape. I'm talking about what we saw against Josh Dobbs, what we've seen in past years against Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, and this don't be aggressive, stand around in a shell so he doesn't get loose. And I hate it so much because after 5-6 seconds of him standing around, then he decides to run, and he runs with no problem. Like, that doesn't work. I hate it. So the good news is I don't see those quarterbacks on the schedule anymore. I don't think that is going to be their downfall for the rest of the season. I don't think you're worried about the legs of the quarterbacks they're facing, at least until they maybe face Jalen Hurts in the playoffs. So, thinking way down the road. But so if they can be more aggressive, I want to see more sacks from this defensive line. But I think they also need to prove they can be an actual good run defense, starting with this next game at Atlanta, which is going to be probably the most important game of the season. Atlanta runs the ball as much as any team in the league. Atlanta wants to run. Atlanta has 2 good running backs, and they're going to keep running, and they're going to run in creative ways. And the Saints, they need to prove they can stop that. They haven't been tested a lot by teams like that. So that's going to be a real test, and I want to know if they're up for it.
Mike, what did they do so well off the bye last year that allowed them to go on that 3-game winning streak? I guess a better way to ask it is, can they replicate whatever they did well a year ago?
Well, that's that's what was so disturbing about the Minnesota game. We were talking about Dennis Allen on the show today, and what his credits are, and I think one of the things Dennis Allen did really well last year was his sort of preaching stay the course really worked for his defense last year. They were struggling in the first 6 weeks of the season, but he believed in his defense, and he didn't panic. He didn't overreact even when they didn't have Marshawn Lattimore. And sure enough, over the last 7-8 weeks of the season, they were one of the best defenses in the NFL. I would like to think that is also the case with the defense this year, except it's weird how they not only had a bad stretch, how they regressed so much. Like, I kept thinking, okay, 2 bad weeks, okay, 3 bad weeks, okay, 4 bad weeks, and then to play their worst yet in that Minnesota game was really disturbing. So, maybe the extra week will help them figure some things out, but we're a little too far in the season for me to be confident that they can figure things out.
Mike Triplett, neworleans.football on Twitter at Mike Triplett. Our chats every week brought to you by Benny's Car Wash, where you could buy now and wash for free for the rest of the year when you buy one of their unlimited packages. Go to bennyscarwash.com. All right, Mike, let's talk about the offense, man. I thought you fixed it. I mean, I gave you, I don't know, I wasn't here last Thursday to talk to you, but I awarded you a game ball for pointing out the Taysom Hill stat, and clearly Sneaky Pete saw it, and because you pointed out the Taysom Hill stat, they leaned on him and they won back-to-back games. And then they just decided they didn't want to give the ball to Taysom Hill at all. So what?
I hate it. I hate it so much. And look, here's the other stat I pointed. First of all, the Taysom Hill stat I've been pointing out consistently for a long time. Since last year is when I originally dug that up when they went into Cleveland in the frigid weather. And I was like, please just give Taysom Hill the ball every time in this game. And it took them a while to do that even in those conditions. But yes, the Taysom Hill stat. But the other stat I dug up last week, which was a very negative stat, is how bad this team has been at running the ball with running backs, especially on 1st and 10. Just let's line up, let's get a 5-yard run, let's make it 2nd and 5. They were incapable of doing that all season long. They were the worst in the NFL. They were averaging 2.9 yards a carry on 1st and 10 runs by running backs. But that was working in this game too. Kamara was getting 9 yards, 8 yards. They averaged 6 yards per carry in the first half. And I get it. They abandoned the run when they were down 24-3. They had, or 27-3 even. They had to, get into desperation mode. Jameis gets him 2 touchdown passes. That was awesome. But over the last 10 minutes, they never went back to it. Yeah. They never ran again. They didn't bring Taysom Hill out again. He didn't touch the ball in the second half. It drove me absolutely nuts. I was mad during the game. I was mad after the game. I was just like, how does this team forget that they have a guy who can get 6 yards a carry? How do they forget about him all the time?
And the Saints had 3 possessions. It was a 1-score game, and they had 3 possessions in the second half. And
all they did was act like there were 90 seconds left on the clock.
Yes. So then let me ask that, since you mentioned Jameis, I know Dennis Allen was asked about it, but I'll get your thoughts on the Carr Jameis. It's so clear, Mike. It all looked and felt and was very obviously different when Jameis was in there as opposed to Derek Carr. But you also had the interceptions, which is also a Jameis thing. So thoughts on what they do there?
My counter argument to that would be we were saying the same thing after the Jacksonville game about how well up-tempo worked for this team. And it did. I mean, they scored like 3 or 4 possessions. Derek Carr never looked better than he had all season when they went into no huddle for the whole second half against Jacksonville. Early in the season, it was Derek Carr throwing those bombs. Hey, when we're all celebrating early in the year, when they came back to beat Tennessee, and he told Rashid, just run, and he chucks it up, and he's done that a couple times. So I agree that Jameis brings that kind of juice, but Derek Carr has brought that kind of juice sometimes. But it's all a stunt. Like show me that you can have a plan for something sustainable. And Derek Carr hasn't been sustainable, and Jameis wasn't sustainable either. It's the same thing we were just talking about, that they didn't settle back into anything once they got within 1 score. It's like that's all they had, and they used it twice, and then it ran out of steam. Yeah. So it's just very frustrating that this team can't find it. If you ever want to be like, all right, now let's go back to what works for us. They haven't found quote unquote, what works for us all year.
Is there any reason to believe over the next 7 games coming off the bye that they will? Like, is there a reason for optimism to think that they can go 5-2?
Yeah, I mean, yes, because they still have this really easy schedule, and they somehow went 5-5 while woefully underachieving. I mean, I keep thinking, when you look at these players they have on offense, and the fact that I will say one thing that has actually trended upward is the offensive line. It has gotten better in recent weeks, definitely in pass protection. It was run blocking well in this last game. So if they can just figure out, like I said, what does Derek Carr want them to do? What does he want his receivers? What picture does he want them to paint for him? What plays does he want Pete Michael to call? What can work for this offense? Just to be a modestly good offense. That doesn't seem too much to ask. But like I said, we haven't seen them figure that out for a long time. But I think that's all it takes. The defense going back to playing not bad, and the offense, being slightly above average. That's all it takes to probably go 5-2. But it feels very difficult.
Is Jason Pierre-Paul the answer?
No, but
I hope you know my tongue was firmly planted in my cheek when I asked you that question.
But the people who reacted, like, why are you signing this ancient 34-year-old? It's over. Don't you know? They're paying the league minimum. I mean, Kyle Phillips is like a 6-year veteran in the NFL who was active for the last game. Like, there's Isaiah Foskey got hurt, so they signed another defensive end. Just because he happens to be a 3-time Pro Bowler doesn't mean, would people rather that they sign, Kasim Edebali and then they'd be happy?
I always say,
hey, but you know what?
He
might also be good. He started 13 games last year. Maybe he worms his way into the rotation.
Can I get 10 snaps from Jason Pierre-Paul with his hair on fire? Yes. I mean, give me 10 snaps. Yes. Fine.
Yeah.
I would rather a guy who's been there, done that, to figure it out for 10, 15 snaps a game than Kasim Edebali. What a pull. That's what Mike said. He just pulled Kasim Edebali like he had it just waiting, just in a bag on the side of his bed, just waiting to play.
I've been playing a lot of Immaculate Grid lately. So, these names are all swirling.
We got to change the open from Mad Libs to Immaculate Grid. That's what we'll do.
Yeah.
He's on Twitter at Mike Triplett, neworleans.football. Get on by, get all the Saints content there. And, of course, our chats with Mike are brought to you by Benny's Car Wash, bennyscarwash.com. Okay, Mike, we appreciate you as always, man. Thanks. We'll do it next week.
All right, thanks.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.